Actor Richard Harrison is perhaps European genre cinema's most prolific American import. After leaving the States in 1961, no sooner than landing in Italy did he find himself under contract by big-time movie producer Italo Zingarelli. From then, Harrison found continual work for nearly 3 decades on the Mediterranean Peninsula, writing every successful wave of fads as they came: sword and sandal adventures, high-seas swashbucklers, 007 rip-offs, spaghetti World War II films, and Eurocrimes. But it was the spaghetti western Harrison would make his most lucrative home in, starring, directing, producing, and writing in over 15 of them, within a time period that stretched from the genre's pre-Sergio Leone beginnings to its final anemic thrusts, and beyond. But in 1968, the spaghetti western had entered its most prolific year, with 2 horse operas being released to Italian cinemas per week on average. Among the slew of programmers were 3 Richard Harrison vehicles: Between God, the Devil, and Winchester, a not very good High Plains adaptation of Robert Louis Stevenson's Pirate Boys novel, Treasure Island. Second is what is considered to be Harrison's crowning achievement of his Italian Western career, A Simple Revenger with a simple name, Vengeance, directed by genre-reliable Antonio Margheriti. In Vengeance, Harrison's character enacts frontier justice on an increasingly bizarre rogues gallery of villains for the gruesome off-screen death of his friend. But the better and more interesting film was Harrison's final 1968 offering, Uno dopo l'altro, One After Another, also known as Day After Tomorrow, in which Harrison plays a bespectacled gunslinger with a very ordinary name.
Stan! 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 Stan!
In previous films, his gunfighters would have colorful monikers like Ringo, Gringo, Rocco, and El Rojo. In One After Another, he's just plain Stan. The film begins with Bank President Jefferson being kidnapped by Mexican bandits and forced to participate in the robbery of his own establishment. On the day of, Jefferson is revealed to be more devious than the bandits and hires his own men to rob the bank, posing as the Mexicans, successfully scapegoating them in the process. Jefferson's hires make off with the money, but all doesn't go off without a hitch. What was meant to be a quick and clean getaway turns into a bloodbath, as a bank teller tries to be a hero at the wrong time, getting himself killed, as well as a number of bystanders.
Jefferson, you crazy? You're hanged for this. I saw you fire.
The shots within the bank alert the populace outside, and the townsfolk retaliate against the bank robbers. This is where One After Another proves to stand above a lot of other westerns. Oftentimes, even in American westerns, civilians will flee in terror of outlaws, openly committing crimes in their township. This is, of course, anachronistic fantasy, created from the minds of 20th century screenwriters with modern-day mentalities. The reality was, tough people, such as Civil War veterans, populated these communities, as well as men and women, who braved the wild and woolly American frontier and carved out a life for themselves in the harsh and punishing landscape. There's more truth in this brief blink-and-you'll-miss-it moment than in 100 westerns. Richard Harrison's Stan enters the picture shortly after the heist, where he's revealed to be the bank teller's brother.
Who did it?
At first, he believes the official story of the Mexicans being responsible, but he quickly deduces Jefferson and his men as the real culprits behind the caper and the death of his sibling. One After Another deviates in a lot of ways when compared to its peers. For one, the body count isn't terribly high. For the first third of the picture, the action scenes consist of non-lethal brawls and copious amounts of hand shooting. It isn't until around the 45-minute mark that Stan makes his first kill, which shows a tremendous amount of restraint on the part of the filmmakers, as most spaghetti western protagonists will down 20-plus people on average by the credit roll. Stan's personal totals barely reach the double digits. Stan himself is not a standard vessel that fits the audience's vicarious needs. Yes, he is gifted with preternatural gunmanship and can dish out beatings as well as take them, but his motives are fluid and remain opaque until the film's final moments, where he is revealed to be entirely irredeemable. Even Clint Eastwood's avaricious drifter characters from the Dollars trilogy retain some redeemable, even altruistic aspects to their personalities.
Here you are, now take this money.
Why do you do this for us?
Why? I knew someone like you once. There was no one there to help. Now get moving.
In contrast, Stan is no better than the villains he foils. He is purely out for himself and seems to enjoy the idea of murder a little too much.
Do you want him alive?
or dead.
Mexican antagonists in spaghetti westerns are wily, violent, and ever laughing. And while one after another's ethnic bad guys are anything but benevolent, they are treated with much more care and believability than one has come to expect from these films. Much is focused on their community, which includes women and children, and we as audience members are asked to sympathize with the group when they are attacked by angry townsfolk.
Just look around you at the slaughter. The men they tortured and killed, murdered our women. They butchered even babies, they showed no mercy.
Argentinian-born Spanish film actor José Bordallo plays the main antagonist, bank manager Jefferson, a respected individual with a slimy underbelly, a major deviation from his usual boisterous Mexican bandit king roles in other Euro-westerns. Rounding out the bad guys is Jefferson's right-hand man, Glenn, pronounced Gleen for some reason, played by Italian actor Paolo Goslino, who, unlike some of the other cast members, was a favor hire, according to star Richard Harrison.
I do remember because one actor was a very nice fellow. In fact, another actor who became a producer, Mark Gaiman, asked me if I could use a friend of his, and I got him in the film. He was a good actor, and it was enjoyable working with him. I don't remember all the actors, but I remember I was able to get him in the film because he wasn't working at the time. But I remember he had a good face, and he was a good actor.
Despite the blatant favoritism, Goslino, a familiar regular in genre fare, is memorable in the role as the archetypal upfront heavy, a perfect foil to the more Weasley Jefferson. Another peculiarity is the amount of screen time devoted to the film's female lead, played by English actress Pamela Tudor. Women are normally secondary figures in spaghetti westerns. The male lead tends to be asexual, consumed by personal vendetta or monetary gain, sometimes both, as in the case of Stan.
Come on, wash my back. Come on, have a heart.
The few times Italo-Western anti-heroes do involve themselves with the opposite sex, it usually is always an ill-fated romance.
Lurid prostitute!
But Pamela Tudor's Sabine proves much too resourceful a character to fall into the familiar fates of females in the genre. Not only is she capable of protecting herself against assaults, but she's able to hold her own against Stan's duplicitous nature, at one point successfully blackmailing him.
You really want the gold? Hey, pistolero? All right, I'll make you a deal. You can have it all. The gold, and me, of course.
The ritual beating/torture of the anti-hero is a staple of spaghetti westerns, and normally arrives 2/3 of the way into the story, so that the final act can consist only of the protagonist's Christ-like return and swift vanquishing of the wrongdoers, almost always in a one-on-one or one-against-many gun duel. One after another's beating uncharacteristically arrives in the middle of Act 2, allowing the film to take its time with Stan's retribution tactics, which are a lot less obvious and more elaborate than merely gunning down the right people on a dusty street. Stan delivers coffins to each of Jefferson's men as psychological intimidation, before finally murdering them one by one in various ways, but normally by blade. One would believe the knifings would be aesthetically handled like the uber-stylized and graphic murder set pieces of Italy's then-emerging genre, the giallo. Films based on homegrown pulp mystery novels that were just coming into their own in 1968. Instead, Stan's killing spree anticipates the comparatively blunt, no-frills slayings of slashers from a decade later. As a side note, the only spaghetti western overtly influenced by giallos is 1971's Price of Death, which opens with a POV of an assailant attacking a young girl, much like the elaborate set pieces seen through the eyes of the killer in countless Italian thrillers of that period. The remainder of the picture is a whodunit, with the detective played by Gianni Garco, who looks remarkably like his popular Sartana character, when in fact he plays Silver, a playboy private sleuth who lives in a mansion with a bevy of women and a personal judo instructor. The Price of Death is actually a sequel to a previous mystery western titled Killer Caliber 32, with Silver played by German actor Peter Lee Lawrence. Lawrence became a prolific leading man in the genre after his brief appearance in Sergio Leone's For a Few Dollars More, in a scene that arguably might have influenced the giallo's style. It isn't until the final moments of One After Another where we get a more traditional spaghetti western climax. The wind-swept town is turned into a purgatorial setting in which Jefferson is unable to escape from by means that would only make logical sense in a nightmare.
We're trapped, Khalid!
Even then, the coup de grace is far from traditional, with Stan using a form of Russian roulette with an unarmed Jefferson as the only player, solidifying Stan's sadism.
What are you doing?
There's just one bullet in this gun, Jefferson, and you can't buy it. Well, it wasn't the first. Perhaps it's the second one.
Harrison is frequently accused of being a lazy performer, often looking as if he wishes he were just about anywhere else. It's not an entirely fair assessment when considering the peculiar circumstances surrounding Italian genre filmmaking. Here is Richard Harrison on those peculiarities.
You had some directors who were more interested in doing the stunts or doing special effects than they did at the acting. For example, Margheriti, he liked to work with the camera and he liked to do effects, but I always felt the actors were not really important in his films. It was much more the action, not the actors. I wanted to do good films, but in this time, they could make a film by using my name or any other name that was working at the time, and they'd get money to make the film with the lead actor's name, but they don't surround you with other actors who could be good. The leading actor, it helps if he has other actors who are also, actors you enjoy working with and can help the film. So that was a problem always. In those days, they sold the films before they made them. So they weren't that interested in making a good film. So that's how it worked.
Perhaps being surrounded by a strong cast is what made the difference for Harrison on One After Another, as he's rarely been better. His Stan is alive with venom, delivering sinister threats and insults through gritted teeth.
Pour one for him. If I gotta listen to this, I better be drunk. Get out of my way, Mexican. I've gotta kill them all, one after the other. Then I'll go any place you want to. They gotta die.
The actor's usual dead-eye stare only adds to the character's sinister persona. Harrison is even called upon to emote convincingly when confronted by the death of his screen brother. It is not entirely equitable to saddle Harrison with all the praise for his portrayal, however, as he was dubbed by one of the many English-speaking voice talents in Italy at the time. In this period, Italian productions were always dubbed after the fact. Pristine audio was not a concern on set, only using crude recording devices in order to keep track of the spoken dialogue to better inform the dubber in post. In his 132 film roles, Harrison seldom dubbed his own dialogue. Here is Richard Harrison as to why that is.
When you do a film, and then afterwards, you're not paid to dub it, and it takes a while, and so I would have to give up a film which I was working on to dub the film, and you wouldn't be paid. And to be honest with you, that's the reason I didn't do it. I did it sometimes. I did it on one film. It had so many different names. In Italian, it was called Colpo Maestro, Servizio su Maestra Meccanica, because I really enjoyed the film, and I thought it was a special film. But so many times you dub a film, and you lose the time to do other work.
Colpo Maestro al Servizio de Sua Maestra Britannica's English title is Master Stroke. This is important because it is worth mentioning that the Master Stroke's opening sequence is a meta-spaghetti western, with Harrison's bad man going through the stereotypical villain motions before being confronted by a poncho-clad anti-hero, played by Luigi Montefiore, he of Anthropophagus fame, who went by the English pseudonym of George Eastman. The scene ends with a shouty Italian director, looking not unlike Sergio Leone, reprimanding Harrison's actor character for a bad take. The only other exception in which Harrison used his own voice that I can find is in the 1966 spy thriller, Ring Around the World.
I have to get to the Hotel Americano. There's some guy waiting for me.
Why waste time with boys?
Why does this always happen to me when I'm in a hurry?
Story of my life! Director of One After Another, Nick Nostro, only made one other Italian western prior to this, a nondescript affair called Dollar of Fire, where a good guy sheriff goes up against some town baddies. Despite an unusually high body count for such an early programmer, the only other standout piece of information worth mentioning is that there was a softcore version of the movie that has some additional non-pornographic scenes that are not included in the normal cut of the feature. But I've never seen it. I swear. One After Another's soundtrack by Fred Bongosto and Berto Pisano is particularly memorable.
Maybe one, maybe two, or maybe three.
The lyrics of the song main theme, Maybe One, Maybe Nine, are inept in the way that most spoken word songs in spaghetti westerns are, as English was not the first, or second, or third, or probably even fourth language of most of the vocalists. But like most of its brethren, Maybe One, Maybe Nine is an inexplicably endearing tune that has endured longer than the film itself, finding its way onto an album of cover songs by a group named The Big Gun Down in the mid-1990s. Here, the title track is reimagined as a rocky pop tune with female vocals.
Maybe one, maybe two, or maybe three.
But a bouncy cover version of its main theme on a forgotten album from an unknown band is about all the goodwill the legacy gods have bestowed upon one after another. Even other tracks from Richard Harrison Italian westerns are better remembered, even though they are attached to inferior movies like 1971's His Name Was King. Its main theme featured in a spaghetti western throwback blockbuster in 2012, and before that, in a semi-successful but now nearly forgotten video game in 2004, Red Dead Revolver, the precursor to the immensely popular Red Dead Redemption franchise. And not to forget, the main theme tune of the pre-Fistful of Dollars Italian western Gunfight at Red Sands, a movie that had more influence on Leone than some scholars and fans would likely admit, was featured in the 2007 Lonely Island dud, Hot Rod. With no proper physical media release in English-speaking countries, at least at the time of this recording, one after another has remained obscure, and therefore unsung.
What a pity.
Harrison would continue starring in spaghetti westerns well into the next decade, but in 1971's Acquasante Joe, a film Harrison makes a brief appearance in, he would find himself forced into the position of commanding the set, when credited director Mario Gariazzo would routinely go MIA halfway through shooting days. The following year, Harrison would find himself directing proper in the 1972 comedy western Jesse and Lester, two brothers in a place called Trinity. As the decade wore on, the westerns dried up, as did the budgets for all Italian genre fare, prompting Harrison to go to the Far East for work. He initially found luck as the title character of a lavishly produced Shaw Brothers film in China, but he would fall into trashy Filipino actioners soon after, each one more shoestring than the next, a few of which have found ironic appreciation on the internet in the late 2000s.
Right? It's my ninja star. This is yours.
In recent years, thanks to popular movie review sites like Red Letter Media, it is Harrison's big gun shoot-'em-ups of the early 1980s that have come under the hipster microscope, much to the actor's personal chagrin. Despite the Filipino actioners being the source of his newfound 21st century ironic fame, Harrison is still not a fan.
Actually, my son Sebastian bought one of the copies and gave me one. I looked at it for like 10 seconds or 10 minutes maybe, and I just threw it away. I was so disgusted.
Nor is he particularly proud of his filmography in general. He maintains that his greatest contribution to cinema was suggesting Clint Eastwood to Sergio Leone when he turned down the lead role in A Fistful of Dollars. But as late as 1987, Harrison proved he wasn't done with his movie career just yet, involving himself in two projects focusing on an often neglected group in Italian westerns, the Native American. One he wrote, the other he got his son Sebastian to star in. Both films were directed jointly by Claudio Fregazzo, he of Troll 2 fame, and Bruno Mattei, another well-known among cult circles schlockmeister. Despite both directors' reputations, White Apache and Scalps might very well be their most competent endeavors. And considering the subject matter of Harrison's screenplay, it can be argued that he delivered the freshest material in a year that was already experiencing a spaghetti western mini comeback, what with international superstar Franco Nero returning to the well of Django in the only official sequel to the 1966 original to date. Today, Richard Harrison resides in a beautiful home atop a mountain overlooking Malibu, California. The property is a testament to his life of achievement in the film industry and is often host to industry parties and destination weddings. Harrison is somewhat reclusive, preferring the company of a good history book to that of the glitz and glamour of the Los Angeles high life just down the road and easily accessible to him. As such, he seldom leaves his Via Francesca, the majestic seaside palace that one after another had a small part in building. Well, alright, that's it, Richard. I promise that I'll never do this to you again.
All right, you